Get ready, because today we're going to discuss 5 things you want to do right after you finish drafting a novel. By the way, my name is Brandon McNulty. I'm the author of Bad Parts, also the author of Entry Wounds, and welcome to my writing channel. A lot of people seem to think that once you finish drafting a novel, somebody's going to throw you a parade, or things are just going to magically fall into place for your story, or everything's just going to get easy from here on out. But that is the farthest thing from the truth. Finishing a first draft is just one step in a larger process. And today I want to help you out. I want to give you 5 tips that'll give you some guidance on what to do right after you finish that first draft. The first tip is a strategy. And what you want to do, you want to open up a blank Word document or take out a blank piece of paper and write down every single scene from your story that you can remember. You're going to do this without looking at your manuscript. You want to do this from memory because what you remember, the scenes that you remember, are either going to be important scenes or scenes that had impact on you. And this is a strategy that I got from Stuart Horowitz's book, Blueprinting Your Bestseller. This is a great guide for revising your novel, what to do after that first draft. And in this book, he talks about the importance of writing down all those scenes. And the thing is, once you do write down all those scenes, all the ones that you remembered, what you can do is you can take out a highlighter or take out a different colored pen and highlight the ones that are good. And by good, that means that they don't have to be perfect. They just have to be good, solid scenes that you plan on keeping around for your next draft. So maybe, highlight them in green or something like that. Then look at your remaining scenes. Ask yourself, okay, are there some bad scenes in here that have potential? Maybe if you revise them a little bit, they can become a good scene. Highlight them in another color. And then once you get through your good scenes and your bad scenes with potential, look at the remaining scenes. These are probably going to be just bad scenes that don't have potential, or they're useless, or whatever it is. But highlight them in a different color as well. This will give you a visual indication on what's working in your story, what needs work, and what can just get tossed out the window. Tip number 2, decide on major cuts and revisions. When we're talking about things to cut in your story, think about characters who didn't pan out the way you wanted them to. Maybe you had a character who early on in the story, they were really flashy, they were exciting, they had a lot of fun things to say, and then over the course of the story you found out that they didn't really factor into the plot in a way that was meaningful. And if that's the case, if they just, kind of taper off over the course of the story, you can cut those characters. Same thing with subplots. Maybe you had an idea for a subplot, maybe it was like a romantic subplot, and you thought things might get interesting, that it might tie into the story's themes in some interesting ways, but that never really panned out for you. If the subplot didn't work, get rid of it. And then another thing to think about as far as things to cut are maybe larger sequences of scenes. Maybe you had like a series of scenes that maybe it was memorable or was exciting or it seemed important, but looking at it now, maybe you can get away with just cutting them out in order to make the story tighter. Now, as for your major revisions, you might want to revise things like your characters, your subplots, your sequences of scenes, whatever it is. But one particular thing I want to bring up here is that consider revising your character motivations. And this is especially if you're somebody who drafts and, takes some risks along the way. Maybe you have a character who you didn't plan would be a murderer, they end up murdering someone. And when you look at it, you say to yourself, okay, well, they might not be the type of person who would commit murder. But if you do go back and you revise their motivations, you give them the right ingredients in order to become somebody who commits a murder or commits any type of crime or whatever it may be, you can make those motivations add up in a way that the character is believable when they do commit that murder. So always keep in mind, character motivations are very important, and they're one of the major things you want to revise before you get into that next draft. Tip number 3, research important things you don't know. And this applies to things like medical knowledge, police work, legal knowledge, psychology behind certain characters, even things like locations. Like if you're writing a story that's set in a real world town, you want to get the details right on, how traffic moves at rush hour and what kind of weather they have at different times of year. So always keep in mind, like if you were writing a draft and maybe it went in a direction you didn't expect, like maybe one of your characters got bit by an animal or something like that, you want to find out what that animal bite will potentially do to them. And you can ask a doctor or you can do some research online, whatever it takes. Tip number 4 is to map out your next draft. If you did the first 3 steps, you wrote out your list of scenes, you did your cuts and revisions, you did your research, now you're ready to decide what that second draft is going to look like. And it's key to remember here that you're past the exploratory stage. stage. You could still take some risks during your second draft, but for the most part, you want to give yourself a concrete map as to what that second draft is going to look like. You can go ahead and you can write it from start to finish, scene by scene by scene, figure out, okay, what is going to happen in scene number 1, then what's going to happen in scene number 2, and then you go through your list and you find that maybe it helps if you rearrange some scenes, or you put some earlier and some later in order to create the right amount of tension or to create the maximum amount of impact in your story. You want to be more focused in the second draft, and it's all about mapping out things right here and now. And then for tip number 5, you'll have 2 options. The first option is that you're going to rewrite your entire novel. And I know that sounds like a lot of work, but after you've done all these revisions and you figured out what kind of scenes need to change and what need to be added and what need to be cut, it only makes sense to rewrite it at this stage because there's so much changing that you want to just have consistency across the board from start to finish. So option 1, rewrite your entire novel. That's going to be your second draft. Option 2 is that you can work on a completely different project. It could be a short story, it could be a completely separate novel, it could be any storytelling related project that you want to work on. And you might say to yourself, Brandon, why would I do that? Why would I put all that effort into planning for the second draft and then jump ship onto another project? And there are some major advantages to doing this, believe it or not. And the first one is that you give yourself some distance between you and that first story. And this is important because once you do come back to that first story, you'll have a much more objective view on it. You'll be able to spot its flaws more clearly. You'll be able to approach it with a fresh mind and maybe potentially even some fresh, new, exciting ideas. And the other advantage to starting a new project is that sometimes when you start that new project, it becomes a great story in its own right. And this happens because usually when you have something on the back burner that you're waiting to come back to, you're letting it cool down, when you have a story like that that you can fall back on, that you already feel good about, you can take risks on a new project. You can take it in all kinds of wild, outrageous directions, and you can have a lot of fun with it. And when you're having fun, oftentimes you create great stories. And this is something that happened to me with the writing of Bad Parts and Entry Wounds. I was in between revisions on Bad Parts. I had handed it off to a buddy of mine, and I was thinking, maybe I could go through Bad Parts again and fix a few scenes here and there. And I said to myself, you know what? No, I'm going to take a break from it. I'm going to try out this new idea. I have an idea for a guy. He picks up a haunted gun, and he can't put it down until he kills 6 people with it. And I thought, maybe this will turn out stupid, maybe it won't. I ended up writing it, I had a lot of fun with it, and I ended up getting 2 novels instead of 1. So always consider that option. You can, of course, just rewrite the first book and get it done as many times as you need, finish as many drafts as you need until it's ready, or you can take a break and explore a newer story. Either way is fine, but be aware of your options. So I hope this helps. Question of the day: have you ever finished drafting a novel? And if so, what was the first thing you did afterwards? Let us know in the comment section below. Thank you guys for watching. If you want to support the channel, please pick up a copy of either one of my novels. Also, be sure to check out my other videos. Hit the like and subscribe buttons for me. Share this video with a friend. And as always, remember to keep on writing.